Hi, everyone. Thank you all who are joining right now. Just waiting just one moment. Okay, I think we can get started. So my name's Michelle McGinty. I'm really excited here to be presenting today on making an impact with renewable energy fuel purchases. I'm the Senior Manager of Program Outreach for Center for Resource Solutions and joined today by some great colleagues in this sector. They'll all introduce themselves as well during their presentations, but I think we're in for a really good session where you'll get a lot of different perspectives on the renewable fuels space. Before we dive in, just a little bit of housekeeping. This presentation will be recorded and posted on the Center for Resource Solutions website after about a week or so after this webinar. We'll also post the slides as well. And finally, at the end of our presentations, there will be a Q&A section. We want to make sure to get to your questions. So feel free to use the Zoom chat on the Q&A. Or there's a Q&A at the bottom of your screen, I believe, where you can put any questions you have for the panelists throughout, and we'll be sure to get to those at the end. So to dive in here, just a little bit about Center for Resource Solutions, the nonprofit I work for. We have been around for over 25 years with the mission to create policy and market solutions to advance sustainable energy. To that effect, we have a few different work streams. We work on some expert assistance projects. We also work on renewable energy and climate policy. We're not a lobbying organization, but mainly we give expert advice on REC accounting and carbon accounting, and especially how the voluntary and the compliance markets might interact. Under the policy team, we launched the Clean Energy Accounting Project, or CEAP for short, to tackle tricky clean energy accounting issues and create some consensus-based best practices. As an example, one of the projects that we plan to work on under CEAP for next year that is relevant for this space is a project on market-based accounting for renewable fuels. So in this CEAP initiative, we will aim to answer the question of what are credible market-based rules to account for the direct emissions associated with the use of renewable fuels. As you'll learn later in this webinar, there's some ambiguity right now on the carbon accounting, and we wanted to make sure to provide some guidance for those who are trying to make claims at this time. We plan to start that work in early 2024. So if you want to get involved, please do contact CEAP at resource-solutions.org to learn more. We also host an annual conference called the Renewable Energy Markets Conference, which was in Washington, D.C. earlier this month. It was a great turnout, and we announced that we will be having it in Denver next September. So please look out for that, especially there's a whole track just on renewable fuels. So there's a lot of great content there. And then finally, we're known for administering the Green E certification program for voluntary renewable electricity, carbon offsets, and biomethane. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that later in this presentation. Before we dive in, just to level set a little bit of definition. So biomethane, also called renewable natural gas or RNG, is purified or upgraded biogas, which is made from the decompositions of organic material. So here in EPA's pictograph, you see there's several different waste types that you can use to make RNG. And essentially that degraded manure, organic matter, is produced in an anaerobic digester system. And the main thing is RNG is different than fossil-based natural gas because it comes from renewable resources. There's two main benefits of RNG in that firstly, it's capturing methane that would have otherwise be released into the atmosphere, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. And then also it's able to displace fossil fuels. So instead of using fossil fuels, you're able to use this gas from renewable resources. Also, just briefly, a little bit about renewable fuel certificate. So if you're familiar with the renewable electricity industry, this is like a REC, but for biomethane. So it's called an RFC. So one RFC represents the environmental attributes of one dekatherm of renewable fuels that can be paired with gas consumption. So essentially you have the production, and then the production of that RNG, the gas actually goes into a shared pipeline system. And then the RFC can be used to actually track who gets to take benefit and make claims of the environmental attributes of that biomethane. You also may hear the term RTC, which stands for Renewable Thermal Certificate, and that's interchangeable and means the same thing. So now that we've level set it a little bit, I want to pass it over to Blaine at RTC. You there, Blaine?
Yes, sorry, that was the inevitable fumbling for the controls. So thank you, Michelle. Really appreciate it, and I mean, thank you to you and to CRS for having the chance to chat with folks a little bit today. This is a really interesting set of issues. You know, I was scrolling through the participants list, and I see a lot of longtime colleagues and some friends, and a massive slug of expertise and market impact. So this is a fantastic group that we're circling up with. And you know, I should also note that Randy and Sam here are as smart as it gets in this space. So this should be a pretty good conversation. So what I want to do quickly is introduce the RTC and our perspective, and particularly our members' perspectives on some of these issues and opportunities, because it's a big deal. Next slide, please. Just very quickly, the RTC is a joint initiative of the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions and the World Wildlife Fund, 2 NGOs, and David Gardiner and Associates, where I work. And the punchline here is that heat is half, right? Process heat is half of the world's global emissions from energy use, right? Next slide, please. And the RTC exists to work with large global industrial energy users, large C&I energy users, to figure out how to solve for fossil gas, right? And as you look at our members, these are all companies and organizations that have public greenhouse gas goals, or net zero, or science-based targets, right? Public climate goals. They are mostly global industrials. They all have incredibly complicated operational footprints. They are together using thermal energy at all of the temperature ranges, right? There are companies here that are heating and cooling buildings, including critical care facilities like Kaiser Permanente. There are companies here making beer and chocolate and whiskey, and apparently it's close to lunchtime because I'm thinking about the food part. There are also companies here making pharmaceuticals and chemicals, and that are melting rock to make building materials, Saint-Gobain, right? So there is a huge aggregate appetite here for decarbonized solutions, right? Getting to net zero, and RNG, decarbonized fuels, we can get to green hydrogen at the point, right, are part of the solution stack. And so the RTC exists to help these companies and their peers go to market and figure out how to deploy these solutions. Next slide, please. They are supported by a growing group of RTC sponsors. These are technology developers, third-party financiers, utilities, consultants, right? These are the solution side of the equation, because those companies I just shared with you need partners. They need technology partners, they need deployment partners, right? Our collective goal here at the RTC is decarbonizing global thermal energy, particularly on the industrial side, best possible speed. Next slide, please. We focus primarily on these big 3 chunks of work, right? Technology, market development, and policy. And we are the most important thing here for us is addressing barriers, accelerating solutions, and implementing projects and policies, helping our members implement projects. That's how decarbonization happens. And next slide, please. Here's a bit of a breakdown on what we do, and this is where we'll start to talk a little bit more specifically about RNG, right? So we are looking at this set of 6 technology solutions, right? And part of the really interesting thing about decarbonizing, particularly industrials, but even decarbonizing thermal more broadly, is that none of these solutions by itself can solve the problem, right? None of them provides the the scale and the supply within the time constraint that we have available, right? We are not going to simply electrify the global industrial economy. We don't have time, given the progression of emissions outside. I'm gesturing outside where emissions happen, apparently. So the companies that are coming to this space are very much in a yes and kind of position, right? They're looking at opportunities to electrify and source more renewables, sure. And in fact, I noticed that some of the folks on the session today are longtime leaders in the voluntary C&I renewable electricity market. It really helped make a bunch of this possible. But they're looking at our members on the company. They're looking at thermal energy storage. We're doing a webinar on that tomorrow, by the way. That should be really interesting. And solar thermal and renewable natural gas and green hydrogen. As Michelle noted, and this is a hugely important thing. Renewable natural gas is a double benefit fuel, and maybe it's even a triple benefit fuel, right? Preventing the atmospheric methane emissions is a huge climate win. It's a drop-in solution, right? Can be put into pipelines, and we can talk about how much of this stuff there is and pipeline stuff, but it's available now. And so this is actually one of the places where we see RTC members digging in a little bit, right? Because they've got public goals. Some of those goals are 2050s. Some of those goals are due 2026, 28, 30, which for an industrial is coming up right soon. AstraZeneca is one of our members, and they announced this past summer a really interesting, I think, landmark. It's fair to call it a landmark RNG transaction with Vanguard Renewables, one of our sponsors, to develop a portfolio of new RNG projects here in the US that will meet 95% of AstraZeneca's US fossil gas load. We are developing a case study on this project because it's amazing, and I think it's an exemplar of what's possible here, looking at the voluntary markets, and I think it's also indicative of where a lot of our members are trying to go, right? Looking to source solutions, looking to create new projects, looking to change the energy mix, and looking to reduce their emissions. Next slide, please. I include, this is a lot of links. I included this just so folks would have links to these resources available. We are, as I say, working on an RNG case study with AstraZeneca and Vanguard. We have an RNG case study from the University of California system. They've done a couple of really interesting projects using a couple of different models in different parts of the country. That is up on our website, available for free download, of course. And again, those case studies are really helpful in illustrating how companies and other large energy users are thinking through the complexities here, right? The market sourcing, creating new capacity. Michelle mentioned the greenhouse gas accounting and the claims issues that go with this, right? So there's a bunch to sort, but what's consistent here, I guess the big takeaway that I would offer is that we're doing a lot of work. We have a standing RNG working group, and we are on the verge of publishing a new market assessment of US RNG for the C&I market, particularly industrial market. And we have a growing group of companies that is actively looking at the opportunities to drop their emissions with RNG, right? Because it's an environmental two-fer or three-fer win. It delivers decarbonization value and impact to companies, and is part of transitioning our energy supply, electric and gaseous, right? I mean, I think here to a decarbonized system. So I've covered a lot of ground very quickly, but wanted to give you a sense of sort of what the RTC is and why we're coming to the market, and what particularly our members are thinking about and starting to look at with decarbonized fuels. So thank you very much. Look forward to some discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, the vision report. The last thing, we have a really cool vision report. It's on our website. We have a whole breakout on RNG, so looking at the how do we get from here to 2050 net zero in the US. Come download it. It's got some really interesting information that will fit nicely with this conversation. So I think that's the end for me, and I've included my contact information, and happy to chat with folks downstream.
Thanks, Blaine. So, hi everyone. My name is Sam Lair. I'm policy manager with the RNG Coalition, and today I'll be providing an overview of the RNG policy landscape and key concerns in voluntary markets policy. And sorry about that. We had an alarm go off here on our phones. Next slide, please. So first, a little bit about RNG Coalition. We provide policy advocacy and education on behalf of renewable gas industries in North America. We were founded 12 years ago, really by a group of project developers, but have since grown to include over 370 members, and that really represent the full value chain of RNG and other types of renewable fuels. And so we have marketers, financiers, technology providers, consultants, different energy utilities, and end users of the fuel, all under one sort of big umbrella. And we're proud to represent on the RNG side over 98% of the supply in North America. Next slide, please. So really the way that we view this issue is organic waste to X. So what that means is we're really focused on taking biogas from anaerobic digestion or landfills and turning it into a usable product. That can be biogas directly to electricity. That can be upgrading biogas to create RNG or biomethane, which is our primary focus, which also produces a usable renewable CO2 stream off the back end. We're interested in using renewable electricity or biomethane to produce hydrogen. We can combine that with renewable CO2 to make other types of fuels and other types of inputs to bio-based products. And so again, we're really interested in, first and foremost, the types of thermal end uses that we're talking about here, but also across the board, how these renewable molecules can be used as inputs to various parts of the economy. Next slide, please. So at a glance, we have 44 states and provinces with enabling policies for RNG specifically. That's largely focused on transportation and thermal end uses, as those are the, really the biggest categories that we've been focused on decarbonizing to date. And especially in the transportation sector, our industry has been focused heavily on low carbon fuel standards, which are present in California, Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, and Canada at the federal level. And turning our attention to the renewable thermal side, we're starting to see more renewable gas and clean heat standards, which range from just being a gaseous fuel portfolio standard in a given jurisdiction to being a type of clean heat standard that incentivizes a broader range of technologies, which may include RNG, hydrogen, electrification, and others. So we're seeing that as sort of the next growing category of policies that we're really excited about. And of course, there's a lot of overlap, especially on the renewable thermal side with the work that CRS is doing. We currently have more RNG production capacity in development than we do operating, which has really been a trend that we've seen, I'd say, over the past 5 years or so. And we're actually approaching 1% of total US natural gas demand by volume, which is a major milestone for the industry. When we look at the longer term projections, we see the potential to displace 9 to 26% of combined residential, commercial, and industrial demand of natural gas. And that would be just from anaerobic digestion resources And we think that most of those, the extreme majority of those feedstocks and of that RNG supply can come on, before or around the 2030 time frame. Of course, there's other ways we can produce renewable gas from different types of organic waste feedstocks, such as woody waste through gasification or pyrolysis. And we have member companies and policies that are exploring those, but we see those being a little bit farther down the road. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about the overall policy picture and the long-term vision for our industry, I really like to hit on the Danish and EU strategy for renewable gas, because I think it's important to sort of anchor us in that long-term vision. The Danish gas system actually has around 40% biomethane as of this month, and they expect to achieve 100% biomethane in that gas system in really the early 2030s timeframe. Their strategy as a country, of course, involves electrifying a lot of end uses, but also recognizing where renewable gases are an important component and a necessary component in different parts of the economy. So they're looking at switching some of their pipeline infrastructure to dedicated infrastructure for hydrogen and renewable CO2, even raw biogas, and of course biomethane. And it's important to note here, Blaine mentioned that we can be really a 2 for or a 3 for environmental strategy. Denmark is currently at around 5 to 6% landfill rate, and that's due in large part to the diversion of organic waste to create really a biofeedstock for anaerobic digestion and then biomethane. And so we're really proud of that component, and that's been a big consideration for voluntary buyers who are looking to circularize, in some cases, their own waste, and then reuse that as a form of energy or as another type of platform molecule. Next slide, please. So now, sort of switching gears, more pertinent to the voluntary markets discussion, it's important for folks to understand that we really do have the infrastructure set up now to be able to host these different transactions. And really what that comes down to is the MRET's renewable thermal tracking system and the Greenie certification for renewable fuels. And so MRETS is really the largest renewable energy tracking system that covers renewable fuels, pipeline injected renewable gas in North America. They have a lot of experience on both the electricity and the fuel side, but really, I think, most importantly, they have all of the different data inputs that you need to be able to make and substantiate a claim. So that includes carbon intensity, it includes feedstock, vintage, location, and they're working on always updating that system. So we believe that alone really provides the infrastructure needed to substantiate these transactions of renewable fuels for voluntary customers. And of course, CRS with their Greenie certification has done a great job of really developing an extra stamp of approval that we can put on these volumes, which is in line with the Greenie renewable power certification that's been such an important part of the voluntary renewable electricity markets for so long. So again, we think that these are really the two components that make up the voluntary procurement space, and they've been in existence, and they're ready to be used today and are being used by many companies. Next slide, please. So to really underscore the importance of why we need market-based instruments and standardized reporting, we have so many programs, right, across different jurisdictions in North America and Europe and other places, including the clean fuel standards and renewable gas and clean heat standards that I mentioned, including the EU RED policies, of course, voluntary buyers, and also where clean energy is used as a feedstock. So again, those are the use cases that we've talked about, where biomethane, renewable CO2, and renewable hydrogen, really the suite of different renewable gases, can be used as feedstocks for SAF, biomethanol, hydrogen, more methane, or really however you can use those different renewable molecules. And so we need market-based instruments for those sectors too. Next slide, please. So this is perhaps, the most important slide I think we have here in my presentation, at least. And for the World Resources Institute is generally the authority on greenhouse gas accounting with their GHG protocol, and SBTI really defines the parameters for many of the commitments that are made toward greenhouse gas reductions. And so one of our primary policy pushes and one of the primary needs for this industry is for these organizations to be aligned with the existing practices that are in place across these different programs that we've mentioned. And so really the primary issue here is whether or not, or under what parameters, market-based instruments, in other words, renewable thermal credits or renewable fuel credits, will be allowed to participate under these programs. So again, for those who are following this, you know that WRI published some draft guidance about a year ago that would disallow the use of market-based instruments in Scope 1. They've since gone back and notified everyone that they will be removing that guidance from the final land sector and removals protocol. And they've provided interim guidance that allows for companies who are purchasing these renewable fuels to use their own discretion, really, and to consult their auditors and use existing procurement practices. And so that was a big win, I think, in the near term for those who are looking to procure renewable gas. Of course, they're working on a broader framework for market-based instruments out toward 2024, 2025. But it's important for folks to understand, and I saw a question earlier, and we'll provide a link to WRI's interim guidance. But really, the doors are open for procurement now, and WRI has acknowledged that. And we can provide MRETs and Greenie really as the foundation to our auditors and potential customers for why that is a good and acceptable purchase. Moving forward, SBTI has updated their FAQs to actually exclude market-based instruments for Scope 1 and Scope 3. So that interestingly matches the guidance that WRI removed recently. They're currently accepting comments on and evidence supporting the use of market-based instruments, and in a similar manner to the way that we addressed WRI's comment opportunity, RNGC plans to comment and will hold a working group on this issue. And so I have a working group meeting scheduled for October 17th. We'll be providing a template to provide feedback to SBTI on these issues, and those comments are due November 24th. And so it's important to note that our working group is not limited to our membership for this topic. Would be happy to take additional applicants to that group and talk about this issue more as we approach those key dates here in the next couple of weeks. Next slide, please. So finally, just some broad considerations. We know that market-based instruments are proven tools, they're necessary, and that without them, the ability of corporates to meet these greenhouse gas reduction goals and the ability of our broader economy to change our energy system will be limited. And so we really need alignment with the rest of the world on all areas possible, under carbon accounting, on energy procurement, and on these voluntary markets rules. So with that, thank you, and I'll turn it over to Randy.
I'm not Randy, but I go now. Thank you, Sam.
Sorry, Michelle.
No worries. So yeah, really a great background on both those presentations. Thanks, Sam and Blaine, for sharing that. Now, as I teased earlier, I just want to share a little bit more about the Greenie Renewable Fuels Program. So if you're unfamiliar with Greenie, it's the certification program that CRS administers, and it's really the leader in clean energy certification. As I mentioned, we also certify carbon offsets and renewable electricity. Our Greenie Energy for renewable electricity and RECs is our largest program, where we certified over 110 million megawatt hours in retail transactions in 2021. And just to give you an idea, that's enough to power 4 out of 5 US households for a month. So we really have seen that program grow, and we're looking to, do something similar as far as building trust in a more nascent environmental commodities such as renewable fuels and biomethane in this case. And at the high level, all the Greenie programs are consumer protection programs to make sure customers are getting what was promised to them. So I often get the question of what's the difference between a tracking system, such as MRETS as an example, and a third-party certification. So just to clarify that a bit, a tracking system, issues tradable commodities, and it's basically kind of like an online ledger where you're seeing where things are moving and ultimately being bought and then retired. So kind of is an analogous to, I like to compare it to your online banking system. That's where you see on your account where your money's moving, where our third-party certification layers over that tracking system. So we don't have our own tracking system. It's not supplemental, or it's not replacing it. It's actually layering over it. And in the analogy of your online bank account, we're kind of like the auditors, making sure the money's moving the correct place as you expected. So actually confirming the retirements and the transfers, so there's no double counting or double selling. But also we make a judgment call on what type of fuel source qualifies for greenie. So we actually are judging, what would meet our requirements, which I'll review a little bit in a moment, to make sure that these are the most sustainable fuel source. So it's setting a certain quality standard for the biomethane. And the real benefits of greenie certification is firstly consumer credibility. This is a much more nascent market than renewable electricity. So really having that added trust that there's a trusted nonprofit that is actually third party verifying these transactions and that it's meeting our quality standards. Also risk reduction benefits. So all greenie sellers are audited, so that customers can know for sure that they're getting exactly what was promised to them. These are, intangible environmental commodities, so that can really reduce risk. Quality assurance. So as I mentioned earlier, not every fuel source qualifies for greenie renewable fuels. So it's representing a certain level of environmental rigor, which is important for customers. If they're going to make public claims, they want to make sure to be sourcing very sustainable resources. And then finally, it's important to note we have a stakeholder-driven standard. So the greenie standard is set by an independent greenie governance board that includes representatives from important environmental stakeholders, such as the Union of Concerned Scientists, NRDC, CDP, and others. So when you're following our standard, you're following something set by these important stakeholders. And the real objective of the greenie renewable fuel standard was to really accelerate the adoption and drive voluntary demand of renewable fuels, while also ensuring that the gas is from sustainable renewable resources and meets the highest environmental standard. We also want to make sure that consumers are protected in their purchase and able to make verifiable usage claims. As far as the requirements go, I won't go into all the details, but just some high-level example requirements. So for the geography, we're starting with just the US and Canadian market. We do require regulatory surplus. This is really a key component across all the greenie certifications, in that if you're a voluntary customer and taking voluntary action, you want to move the needle above and beyond business as usual and not just subsidize some state regulation that's required without your action. And so because of this, we require that no RINs or LCFS credits can be used for the same dekatherm sold in a greenie certified transaction, so that these are purely voluntary products, moving the needle above and beyond business as usual. We also require audits. So as I mentioned, all sellers are required to go through annual audits so we can make sure there's no double counting, selling, or claiming of these RFCs. We also do a marketing review of all the sellers to make sure they're giving clear consumer disclosure so customers understand what they're buying. Regarding the production pathways, we have, as I mentioned, fuel requirements of what would qualify to meet our different environmental standards. So obviously the fuel type's biomethane. It can be from digester gas or landfill gas. And then here's a list of feedstocks that we allow. One note is that we don't currently allow CAFOs, or concentrated animal feeding operations. We're currently working with our governance board to see if we can add them at a reduced basis, considering certain environmental concerns that need to be mitigated. We also have a CI score requirement. So if you're not familiar, CI stands for carbon intensity, which is the amount of greenhouse gas emissions produced during the production of a unit of energy. So for greenie renewable fuels, we have a requirement that the maximum upstream CI, so this is up to the point of injection, including linkage, has to be 10% lower than fossil natural gas. So again, the idea is you're doing this to be sustainable, so you need to be less carbon intense than the alternative fossil natural gas to qualify for greeny renewable fuels. I also just want to mention briefly of the option to certify renewable fuels as well as carbon offsets, because we have several gas sellers, considering joining the program. Renewable or biomethane is quite expensive at this point. So some solutions, some gas providers are providing is a percentage of biomethane and then offsetting the remainder of the fossil natural gas with carbon offsets. And we already have a certification called Anew Climate for certified carbon offsets. And in fact, we've had carbon offset natural gas participants in the program for some time. So here's some examples here where gas sellers are, again, pairing their gas sales with carbon offsets. And this would just add renewable fuels or biomethane for a percentage of that. Just briefly, if you're not familiar, a carbon offset's a certificate representing the reduction of 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide or equivalent emissions. So it's very important that those carbon offsets meet certain high quality standards. And that's what Anew Climate does, is it assesses the carbon offset using our endorsed programs you see on the right, who are the project level standards, to make sure, basically evaluate those project level standards to make sure they're rigorous enough to meet these paver requirements you see on the left of my screen, which represent high quality carbon offsets. For example, additionality being a key one, that the sale of the carbon offsets is actually causing emission reduction that wouldn't have occurred otherwise, so that you can account this as a carbon offset. So in that way, Anew Climate's trying to point customers to high quality carbon offsets. The other piece that's very unique to Anew Climate is that it's the only retail certification of carbon offsets. So just like on the biomethane renewable fuel side, we're auditing the carbon offset seller to make sure the appropriate amount and type of carbon offset has been retired and customers are getting exactly what was promised to them. So what's coming next? So as you can tell from the name of the Greeny Renewable Fuel Standard, it's somewhat broad of renewable fuels. We decided to start with biomethane, and next on our path is green hydrogen. So the goal there is very similar, to really accelerate the adoption of green hydrogen while also ensuring it's from a sustainable resource and that the environmental and consumer protection requirements are met from the Greeny standard. So currently that green hydrogen section of the standard is in development with plans to release the final standard by Q2 of 2024. So if you're in the green hydrogen space and you want to get involved with that standard development, feel free to email my colleague, Chip Wood. His email's at the bottom of the screen here to learn more on how to get involved. But there also will be open stakeholder comment periods if you want to stay tuned to that and be sure to participate in those comment periods, with one hoping to be released in Q4 of this year. Moving forward, we do plan to add other renewable fuels as the market interest and our requirements allow. So stay tuned as well for this program to continue into other sectors. Here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions about any of the Greeny programs or anything that CRS does. And with that, I'll hand it over to Randy Lack, who works for Anew, which is a Greeny participant in the renewable fuel space.
Thanks, Michelle. And yeah, no, this was I get the benefit of, or the obstacle of, batting cleanup behind this esteemed group. I really appreciate, first of all, the work done by Center for Resource Solutions, Rachel, Michelle, Rupali, and Alex, and the whole team on the work that's been done to bring a standard to voluntary renewable natural gas in the space. Before that, and I'll talk about sort of the timeline, we were dealing with really transacting this product, all over the counter and via attestation, but clients were really looking for a standard to set in some systematic program to give comfort on accounting and qualification. That's really become as important as ever. We've worked very closely with Center for Resource Solutions, Renewable Natural Gas Coalition, American Biogas Council, Renewable Thermal Collaborative. All of us have been working to really push for a systematic standard, because we're dealing with really hard to decarbonize sectors: steel, cement, chemicals, manufacturing. Thermal replacement in general really needs an inset level mitigation, and renewable natural gas is the logical step there. So Michelle, if you'll go to the first slide, just a quick background on Anew, or sorry, next one. Anew is a new name, pun intended, but really a combination of two companies, Element Markets and Blue Source, which merged last year to create the largest environmental management company in North America. Currently, we're a little over 200 people just in North America alone, focused on all renewable products, environmental products, from carbon emissions, renewable natural gas, renewable energy credits, anything sort of a green traded commodity. And you know, little plug here, we're growing as we're growing our RNG team as well. So if anybody's interested, please reach out, because we are looking to add to our team. As a background for our position, the renewable natural gas market, we've been the largest independent marketer of renewable natural gas, really dating back to the very beginning of the market. In 2008, we transacted renewable natural gas for the first time, moving it via common carrier pipeline to combined cycle power plants for the generation of renewable energy credits. In 2012, we moved into the renewable fuel sector. We had the first low carbon fuel standard pathways, individualized pathways for renewable natural gas. We did, you know, I think some of the first RIN pathways into the renewable fuel standard. And then in 2015, we started moving renewable natural gas in as a thermal replacement product. And so that our history in voluntary renewable natural gas transactions really going back almost a decade now. And we've seen a rapid advancement of the programs. If you look at where it is now, Emirates announced their tracking system in 2019. We worked very closely with the Center for Resource Solutions, and we're on the working group, really developing the protocol and launching that in 2021. And then alongside of that, we've had these sort of interim standards of how do we actually track this? What happens? Dating back to, I think it was 2017, CDP published guidance that the use of renewable natural gas as a replacement product via a common carrier pipeline was a 1-to-1 replacement and a mitigation. It was only recently that we had this published guidance come out and said, well, wait a minute, maybe it doesn't. And sort of there was a pullback in the guidance by CDP and an intimation or a release in the draft guidance that it wasn't going to qualify. And then lo and behold, we're back in 2023 where the guidance that was provided that it doesn't qualify now says, actually, we're going to leave it up to you and your auditor to decide if it does. And so we're in this world now of, we're really calling it a double negative. So RNG feels like it's on a good path for qualification. And just taking a big step back, this is a necessary drop in fuel. There are so many companies that are going above and beyond. And whether it comes to carbon offsets, which Michelle talked a little bit about, or where it goes to RNG, we're in a place in time where companies need to be encouraged to decarbonize and not criticized for making best efforts to do so. So I was really pleased to see the Greenhouse Gas Protocol reverse the draft guidance. But overall, you know, we're very supportive of companies' journeys to decarbonize, and we're you know, excited to be able to provide a product that has a validation by the Center for Resource Solutions, can be cleared on an MRETS program so that there is no double counting or other issues, and it's all verified by independent third parties. So we're in this sort of cycle now, and I'll talk about the benefits of that in a minute, because we're actually seeing upticks of volume and pricing, which I'll hit on in a moment. Next slide, please. I think one of the things to talk about is, you know, if you look at the line at the top, this is really the prevailing price of renewable natural gas in the market today. So if you're producing renewable natural gas from landfills, this is really just 11.727 RINs per MMBTU, which is the conversion rate times the prevailing daily price of RINs. And so what we've seen is a really consistent and valuable product that's produced. And so the super majority of existing renewable natural gas is going into the RIN and LCFS markets, We're also seeing, and I'm really just talking about what's at the margin there. We're seeing a very large uptick. We're spending a lot of time working on exports of products, exports to Canada, exports overseas, and even alternate uses of products into biobunker, shipping fuel. So there is a lot of competition for this renewable natural gas, which causes it to be really valuable. And now going into IRA, hydrogen, methanol utilization, what have you, there's just going to be an ongoing increase in renewable natural gas. And one of the things that isn't taken into consideration, what I'm going to talk about in a minute, is that all RNG is not necessarily equal. You have to look at how it nests and where it goes into programs. So you're going to see differentiation in pricing depending upon the vintage of the product, the source of the product, and where it can qualify, the ability to export that product, and then ultimately, which Michelle keyed in a little bit about, on the carbon intensity of that product. What we've seen, and this is just, we looked at this in 21, 2, and 3 alone, isolating it down. Again, our transactions go back to 2015, which since that time, we've actually moved now approaching 10 million MMBTUs into voluntary buyers. So we've had a lot of success around these programs, everything from manufacturing, utility, tech, and large chemical buyers that are in there. In 2021, our average price was right at $10 per MMBTU, and you know, about 5-6 transactions that year. That was actually a little bit of a down year, even post 2020. COVID affected just attention on things. We've seen a significant uptick in transaction volumes, a number of transactions, and an uptick in pricing going into 22 and 23. Average price has been closer to $15 this year. And that does cover a larger gamut of transactions. We have transactions that are below that value for existing inventory, sort of past vintage, and then newer vintage or lower carbon intensity or regionally specific projects have been trading at a premium. So we've seen prices much higher than that. And then, you know, Blaine talked about a little bit, you know, like AstraZeneca transactions, others, you know, we're excited to see large long-term buyers come into the market. There are projects that are out there that need long-term offtake. We can't just build this market out on a spot market, meaning sort of an annual or daily transaction volume. So those long-term buyers that are coming into the market, giving certainty on supply, University of California, L'Oreal, utility buyers, AstraZeneca, what have you, are what are going to get new projects built. But what we look at is those projects take time to bring online. So it can take 2, 3, 4 years to bring a new project online. And so what we really like is that we're able to use the volume of existing supply in order to supplement and cover that gap between contract and construction. So just moving on. A lot has been talked about, so I'm going to go really quickly because I'm watching the clock. The big thing is that, and Michelle talked a little bit on it about what qualifies and what does. And I think what doesn't qualify, you really need to be specific about when you think about this. So number one is what doesn't qualify. If the gas doesn't go into a common carrier pipeline, it doesn't qualify unless it's directly connected to your facility. So we've seen companies out there try to market a product where it's going to a boiler and then they're essentially selling that to another party. That doesn't qualify under this standard. Any sort of behind the meter activities are just not going to be transferable. That includes, you know, can include waste incineration, thermal behind the meter. Also, you need to be very careful about how you're actually inventory and tracking vintage. So the way that the standard was set is the aperture was essentially open wider on vintage early on in the program, and it's going to be cut down as we go ahead. So there's a shift after the end of this year from a 15-year look back to a 5-year look back starting next year, and then we're going to be cutting down to a 2-year look back. So it was sort of a ramp up of the program. In the world of carbon intensity, we have some clients that actually do want high focus on carbon intensity. I think when looking at it, the average carbon intensity of the product we've sold in the voluntary market has been somewhere around a -30 this year. And we have some clients that just care more. It's going to be a little bit harder on the voluntary side because a lot of the really low carbon intensity products do come from those contained animal feedlots, which don't currently meet Center for Resource Solutions standards. But we have been able to find some negative carbon intensity products to be able to bring to clients. And I'm pleased to say that we've been through the certification, and so I hope that will be a glide path to others to participate and now get that up and going. Next slide, please. So a couple case studies, I'm going to run through these again quickly. So we have a pharmaceutical company actually trucks CNG to their facility because they are in a remote area, and they actually bundled the environmental attributes from renewable natural gas that again was injected in the common carrier pipeline with the CNG that was delivered into the trucks to their facility. And this was the best way for them to find that carbon neutral thermal mitigation for their facility. And they actually did buy a little bit of extra, knowing that they can carry the vintage forward into a subsequent year. So this was a situation where, you know, case in point, you can buy a 2022 vintage into 2023, and they can actually balance their variable, you can balance variable supply with fixed demand or fixed supply with variable demand. So it does allow some flexibility, and that was a welcomed need for this client because they actually didn't know what their end of use was going to, their end of year use was going to be, being a Northeast facility and using a lot of this for heat. Next slide, please. And this is just a case study for utility example. We're seeing more and more of this, and I'm really pleased to see the utility programs that are emerging. And this is a utility that implemented a green gas program, needed to be able to have that verification, that stamp of comfort. And they were able to point to this actually to get it through with the PUC. And essentially what they're doing is matching the attributes with the environmental attributes with the pipeline gas. The delivery mechanism that has been acceptable is the book and claim or mass balance. So gas is injected into the common carrier pipeline, match at the end delivery to the utility, and then match with the natural gas consumption. And then what happens is Anew, as the seller of the product, we go through the certification, essentially certifying all the sales we go through on an annual basis to make sure that the gas was injected, metered, documented, delivered, not double counted. And so that's really the key essence of the program. So with that, I'll stop here just out of respect for time. Again, please feel free to reach out with comments. Again, also we're happy to be growing our team, so looking for other folks who can join us on that journey. So I'll pause here and we can kick it over to questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Randy. And yeah, the rest of the panelists, if you want to turn on your camera, we can do a bit of the Q&A. We just have a few minutes here. Let me stop my share. There we go. Few minutes here, so feel free to ask any questions. If we don't get to them right now, we'll try to revert back over email to get all those questions answered, because there's a lot of great ones. One quick one that I just wanted to answer real quick is that someone asked, why Greenie requires regulatory surplus. So just to double down on that, across all of our different programs, we require regulatory surplus because these are voluntary products. Again, these are voluntary customers taking voluntary action, usually paying more for what they're getting, and they want to make sure that they're pushing the market forward. Another way to think of it is that, they don't want to kind of double pay for something. If their utility is already required to do something and they're already paying into that utility to do that, this is actually above and beyond business as usual. And so that's a key component that the Greenie Governance Board thinks it's important for these voluntary products. So that's why that's a requirement. Just looking at other questions here, I think one of the big topics and a lot of questions was about, the WRI guidance and the greenhouse accounting protocol. I think, Sam talked about it a bit, that it's a bit, at discretion at this point. So there's a bit of ambiguity right now. That's why CAP, as I mentioned, is planning to work on some interim guidance. As we know, we can't wait to take action right now to reduce carbon emissions. And so we want to start doing so. But there's a question for Blaine here on RTC's perspective. I don't know, Blaine, if you want to talk to it briefly.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's an important question, and we think that that mass balancing is really important, right? I mean, think about the fundamental market dynamic that's there, right? If a company is going to partner, by being a long-term off-taker, this is the thing that has helped make the renewable electricity market accelerate so dramatically and effectively, right? So if a company is going to make that commitment and is going to put X amount of gas, renewable zero carbon gas onto the grid over there, we think it's unbelievably perfectly appropriate to credit that against their scope 1 emissions, right? It is a grid connected world. Let's do it the best way possible, right? Let's get all that stuff dialed in. It's a grid connected world. That's actually part of the magic of the potential impact here, right? Is that companies like AZ and the University of California can actually change the overall energy portfolio mix. That's amazing. And we need as much of this as we can get, as fast as we can possibly get it. So do it right, do it well, do it credibly, get after it.
Awesome. Thanks, Blaine. And I see we have like 2 minutes left. So I might just ask Sam and Randy, any last words that you want to put in either about that topic or anything else, either opportunities or challenges in this market? Randy, I think Sam pointed at you.
Yeah, so what I would say is, look, to echo what Blaine said, is that this is taking a waste resource and making it a really valuable decarbonizing asset. I think one of the things is don't misjudge the amount of time and energy it takes to get these projects built. Right now, we're dealing with staffing shortages, long lead times on supply chain, and so projects that were taking 12 to 18 months to get built are now 24 to 30 months. So to the extent that this is part of what you want to incorporate into your program, start now. The other thing is that think about how to use the really exciting emergence of programs like the Renewable Fuel Standard, the ability to internationally export the products, to be able to use that as a backstop to overall sustainability programs. A few groups out there have been able to sponsor projects, sell some of it into the market, keep some of them for themselves as thermal mitigation. So you're able to use those high value programs as also a backstop for development of the projects yourself. And these projects really need long-term offtake. They need the debt financing. They need the certainty. So it's really important for utility and sustainable buyers to be at the table, providing reliable long-term offtake.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sam. We're at the end of the time.
Sorry, thanks, Michelle. And thanks, Randy. Thanks, Blaine. Couldn't agree more with what you guys laid out there. And I'll just reiterate as my final thought that, we know there's a lot of uncertainty around the carbon accounting and procurement policies, or there has been, right? But as you can see, we're moving quickly in a direction toward a lot more certainty on that, and including with the recent text available from WRI. And I think, when you see the commitment of a 10x increase by the European Commission for biomethane, when you see the Denmark story, when you see all of the developing policies in the US, including the IRA, I think we're quickly moving toward a world where these things are standardized across the board. So look forward to helping achieve that, and feel free to reach out to really any of us here if you have questions around how those policies are standardized, and what that looks like on the level of detail of WRI and other things.
Awesome. Well, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all for the panelists here, the wealth of knowledge on this panel. As Sam mentioned, feel free to reach out to any of us. I know there's some unanswered questions, so we'll get back to you. We'll also be posting this webinar on the CRS website and the deck. So stay tuned for that. And thank you all. I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.